Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, a pro-Iran Hezbollah official says Riyadh will be defeated in Yemen. We have more on that story. Also tonight, a hotel in Somalia is rocked by a bomb and gunfight in Mogadishu. Boko Haram fighters told to kill wives as troops take its headquarters once again tonight. And Senator Robert Mendez has released a statement criticizing the Obama administration on Iran. We have all those stories and more, plus an exclusive interview with Charles C. Johnson of Got News Tonight, as he has a new expose saying that Allen West sexually harassed two women. We have all those stories and more on the Evan Miller Report for this Friday, March the 27th, 2015. The Evan Miller Report starts now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evans with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Friday, March the 27th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller. Thank you so much for joining us today on the program. As I said, Charles C. Johnson of Got News will be with us at 8:15 Eastern, 5:15 Pacific to discuss this major expose tonight. But first, ladies and gentlemen, we start off with a little bit of housekeeping news tonight. We'd like to welcome our previous affiliation, Pundit Press, back to the Evan Miller Report. We welcome our audience from Pundit Press back tonight on podcast. We will be back in full on Monday. I've spoken to the officials over at Pundit Press, and they have decided to bring us back on their lineup at thepunditpress.com. So we are pleased to have them back with us. And of course, any of you on Pundit Press will be able to listen to tonight's interview between Charles C. Johnson of Got News Tonight. But wanted to get that out of the way, and of course welcome Pundit Press back, and we hope the folks over at Pundit Press and those of you listening on Pundit Press enjoy listening to the Evan Miller Report. Now on to the news tonight, wherein Saudi Arabia will be roundly defeated on its air campaign against Yemen. This coming from Hassan Nasrallah, head of Lebanon's pro-Iran movement Hezbollah, said today, calling on Arab leaders to stop the aggression. The outcome of this war is clear. Saudi Arabia will be defeated and the Yemeni people will have an undeniable victory, Nasrallah said in a televised speech. Hezbollah is now militarily involved in Syria, where it is bolstering the embattled regime, and in Iraq, where it says it is fighting Sunni extremists. A months-long rebellion by Shiite fighters in Yemen escalated into a regional conflict Wednesday when a coalition led by Saudi Arabia began conducting airstrikes on rebel-held territory. Hezbollah firmly criticized the operation, calling it unjust and illegal. The Hezbollah chief lodged into a strongly worded diatribe, as we described, against the Saudi kingdom, accusing it of lodging airstrikes against Yemen to regain its hegemony over the country. He said, quote, "The problem is you failed. Your way of doing things failed," he said, addressing the Saudi leadership. He called on the Arab League, instead of being complicit in the bloodshed in Yemen, to assume a historic responsibility by stopping this aggression and moving towards a political solution, he said. A two-day Arab League meeting from Saturday in Egypt's Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh is expected to be dominated by the Yemeni crisis. Stay with the Evan Miller Report. We'll continue to bring the very latest on the current conflict going on in Yemen and the possibility of civil war. Over to Somalia now, where the government forces are fighting to regain control of a hotel in the capital, Mogadishu, which has been stormed by al-Shabaab terrorists. 10 people have been killed in the gun battle at the Meg El Makri Hotel, including the Somali ambassador to Switzerland, Yusuf Barouri. Other diplomats escaped by jumping from windows. U.S.-trained Somali special forces have been able to take back control of most of the hotel. Latest reports say the militants are now on the floors and roofs firing guns and throwing grenades. Police officer Major Assault told Reuters and ITN that he believed there were originally 9 attackers, 6 of whom had been killed. And moving on tonight to Nigeria, where their military today announced that troops have retaken the town of Ganswa from Boko Haram, from which the it declared a capitate last year. Defense spokesman Chris Alku told a news conference in the capital, Abuja, that the recapture came after concerted and well-coordinated land and air operations. A lot of arms and ammunition have been recovered, and the administrative headquarters of Boko Haram has been completely destroyed, he said. A massive cordon and search has commenced to locate any of the fleeing terrorists or hostages of the custody. Of course, earlier this month, residents who fled the town in Borno State told the AFP news agency that militants have been massacring Ganswa and killing local people who were unable to flee. That led to speculation that the group, which has pushed out a number of towns in 3 northeastern states in recent weeks, was preparing for a final assault. Okud said dead bodies have been discovered in a well, while one man was forcibly conscripted into the militants' ranks, said the group's leader, that ordered women in the town to be killed. And finishing up the international news this evening, yesterday afternoon, following a slew of news reports about substantial concessions by the U.S. negotiations in Iran talks, Democratic Senator Robert Mendez of New Jersey released a statement which read, quote, "If today's news report from Louisiana is true, we are not inching closer to Iran's negotiating position, but leaping towards it with both feet. We've pivoted away from demanding the closure of the Fordo when the negotiations began to consider its conversion into a research facility to now allow making hundreds of centrifuges to spin at this underground bunker. It is extraordinary on many levels that so many giveaways would be tossed at the Iranian feet that it should be publicly revealed. Many speculate by the French who object to the collapse that a Democratic senator would tell the president his deal is going nowhere and that things have gone so far out of whack without a vote from the Senate. Indeed, with Iranian insurgents and allies destabilizing the entire Middle East, why are we lifting sanctions or talking about a deal at all unless the deal is far different from being reported? Look for an overwhelming vote in April to inject the Senate into the process to increase sanctions. And that coming from tonight from the Washington Times is Jennifer Rubin tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So very disturbing fact right there that even certain Democratic senators, including Senator Mendez, is even now willing to admit at this point, ladies and gentlemen, that there is a problem with these current negotiations with Iran and that these should stop, in his opinion. All right, folks, moving on as we conclude the international news, moving on some national news now. At least 2 people are thought to be missing after an explosion sent flames tearing through a Manhattan building. The blast, the result of faulty utility work, caused 3 buildings to collapse on Thursday in New York, injuring 22 people and 4 critically. Officials are trying to determine whether one person who has been reported missing is connected to the incident. As the fire is contained, families are desperately searching for loved ones. The firefighters and medical staff worked overnight to try to douse the flames in Manhattan's East Village. One said, quote, his date who lives in a hospital remembers only stumbling out of the restaurant. He says, I just pray my brother shows up, says another, Tyler Fedora. Earlier, officials said investigating the cases of 6 other people who had been reported missing besides Mr. Fergora and Mr. Lucan. The people were all unaccounted for, but their connections to the incident are still not clear. Federal officials have charged a former Alabama police officer with violating the civil rights of an Indian man. Prosecutors say Eric Salone Parker, 26, used unreasonable force against Cerebral Palti, a 57-year-old grandfather who was recently moved to the U.S. Mr. Patel suffered injuries in February, including partial paralysis, when Mr. Parker pushed him to the ground. Mr. Parker, who maintains his innocence, also faces state assault charges. Mr. Patel was walking outside his son's home on February the 6th in the Alabama suburb, when police said they received a call from a neighbor about a suspicious person. Footage from the police camera show Mr. Patel, who speaks no English, trying to walk away when the officers approached him. They detained him and eventually shoved him to the ground. All right, folks, you may have noticed Corey Evan is not with me today. He is on assignment for the SHR Weekend News, and of course, he will be with you tomorrow at 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific on the network. But he did manage to record a business report for us, so let's get the latest on the markets now, shall we?
Well, the stock market ended up, barely. I'm Corey Evan with your closing bell report. The Dow was up 34 points at 17,712, the Nasdaq up 27 points at 48.91, and the S&P 500 up almost 5 points at 2061, so a gain, but hardly one. U.S. economic growth cooled in the fourth quarter as previously reported, and after-tax corporate profits took a hit from a strong dollar, which could undermine future business spending. GDP expanded at a 2.2% annual rate, the Commerce Department said on Friday in its third estimate of GDP. That was unrevised from the forecast the government published last month. Businesses throttled back on inventory and equipment investment, but robust consumer spending limited the slowdown in the pace of activity. The economy grew at a 5% rate in the third quarter, they say. After-tax corporate profits declined at a 1.6% rate last quarter after increasing at a 4.7% pace in the third quarter. Corporate profits from outside the U.S. fell at an 8.8% rate, the steepest decline since the 2009 recession. Next up from Reuters, Dow Chemical Company said it would separate a significant part of its chlorine business and sell it to smaller rival Olin Corp in a tax-efficient deal valued at about $5 billion. The transaction, structured as a reverse Morris Trust deal, allows Dow to sell its non-core U.S. Gulf Coast chlor-alkali and vinyl, global chlorinated organics, and epoxy assets without having to pay taxes. Dow Chemical shares rose 3.5% to $48.49 in early trading today. Olin's shares jumped as much as 26.3% to $34.34, valuing the company at $2.71 billion. Dow has been shedding non-core assets to focus on more profitable businesses such as packaging, electronics, and agriculture. The company first announced plans to sell a bulk of its chlorine operations in 2013. Chief Executive Andrew Liveris told Reuters on Friday there could be more deals as the company simplifies its joint ventures. Under the Olin deal, Dow will get $2 billion in cash and cash equivalents, about $2.2 billion in Olin stock, and Olin will assume $800 million of pension and liabilities. After the deal closes, likely by the end of the year, Dow shareholders will potentially control a little over 50% of the shares of the combined company, with Olin shareholders holding the rest. And Ford Motor Company's chief executive Mark Fields earned $18.6 million in total compensation during a challenging first year at the helm of the second largest U.S. automaker. Mr. Fields, a veteran Ford executive who took the top job in July, oversaw the launch of several new vehicles and continued the string of solid results. But Ford lowered guidance for important financial metrics, including profits and revenue. The 54-year-old Mr. Fields succeeded Alan Mulally, Ford's CEO, for 8 years starting in 2006. During Mr. Mullally's tenure, Ford streamlined its business and rebuilt its finances. Mr. Mullally's listed compensation over nearly a decade in Ford's top job exceeded $200 million. Just last year, he received a $22 million pay package, including $3.2 million under the automaker's incentive bonus plan. Ford Executive Chairman Bill Ford was awarded $15.1 million in compensation last year. The compensation figures were outlined in the company's annual proxy report. The Dearborn, Michigan automaker reported $3.2 billion in net income last year amid steady profitability in North America. But the company continues to face challenges in Russia and South America, where weak economic conditions and other factors are crimping auto sales. Ford had said it would break even in Europe this year, but backed off that goal shortly after Mr. Fields took the helm. Ford's share price over the course of 2014 was flat, opening the year at $15.42 and closing at $15.50. Mr. Fields is now under pressure to deliver better results. He has called 2015 a breakthrough year for the automaker and expects momentum after last year was marked with sales decline in some of Ford's most important products and region. The compensation figures also come as Ford, GM, and Fiat Chrysler automobiles are about to head to negotiations with the United Auto Workers Union. A new 4-year deal for 135,000 UAW workers is scheduled to be signed in September. So how about it, Jay? Knowing how much the top automakers' top executives are making, and knowing what's going on with the union deals, would you ever consider a Ford?
Jury is still out on that one, Corey. Don't know if I would buy a Ford myself. And I'm still like my Honda, just the way it is. That's Corey Evan. He has the business news. And, of course, Corey Evan will be back later in the program with lawsuits across America and the entertainment report. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the big major story of the day that has rocketed America today. According to GotNews.com, Charles C. Johnson, he confirms that conservative icon Alan West sexually harassed 2 different women at the media company Pajamas Media, using more than a dozen sources. According to Charles, West, who was fired from Pajama Media, according to Charles, grabbed the breasts of then a 24-year-old Michelle Fields, who is a correspondent over at Fox News. And joining us in an exclusive interview on the Evan Miller Report tonight to talk more about his expose of Alan West is Charles C. Johnson. Charles, good evening.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure having you with us. Now, this was a shocker to me today, finding out that Alan West, one of the most conservative politicians here in America, is sexually harassed 2 women. You say you did this investigation. It took you 2 years. Now, in these 2 years investigating this, did you see anything in Mr. West's political career or military career that would have suggested sexual harassment of women in any way?
Well, what's interesting is that I went to Florida. I interviewed a number of people who worked with Alan West. I also interviewed people who worked with him while he was at Pajamas Media, which is an LA-based company, although he was at the time staying in Florida. And a picture began to emerge of a guy who couldn't really control himself around women. And the Michelle Fields and the Sarah Culverhouse Mills story are just 2 examples. Those are the more prominent ones of women that I've identified who say that Alan West mistreated them.
And what proof do we have of this? If you can tell us a little bit about this.
Sure. So to give you a sense of it, at Pajamas Media, which is a website company based in California, I interviewed a number of kind of insiders there. West left very abruptly there. There was a story in BuzzFeed that he had called a woman who worked there a slur, and then that was why he was fired. But the insiders that I spoke to at Pajamas, some of whom have since left, they've told me a different story, and they've independently kind of told me this story. I confirmed it with some other people who knew about it, and it looks as if it's true that Alan West sexually harassed Michelle Fields, and the Culverhouse story was also confirmed by several people who were there, independent of each other.
Now, how many people say they witnessed this first event with Mrs. Fields? I want to specifically be on Mrs. Fields for just a moment, because many people who know of Michelle Fields, very popular, only 27. She's now 27 years old. You say at 24 years old when this happened. So this was quite some time ago that this happened. So
Indeed.
was there many? What was there?
Indeed.
Many
So I
witnesses?
reached out.
Go ahead.
So what happened was I reached out to the people who were in the know at Pajamas Media, and they confirmed it. That she apparently Miss Fields went to her bosses there and reported it, as well as did Miss Colbahouse Mills. Miss Colbahouse reportedly actually drafted the press release because she's a communications professional. She drafted the press release for Alan West's removal at Pajamas as a contributor.
And so many people witnessed this. Now, what took so long for Mrs. Fields to come out and say that Mr. West sexually harassed her?
Well, Ms. Fields wasn't the one who came out. It came out and said it. It was corroborated by many people who were in Pajamas. But I've got to tell you, this is kind of an open secret. It's well known in Florida GOP circles. It was well known, and there'll be other women that come forward in the coming days as time goes on.
Okay, you just mentioned Florida circles. Can you expand on people who knew within Florida? Is it people within the Florida State GOP? Is it people within Mr. West's former?
Yes, it's people within the. Yes, it's people within the Florida GOP as well as people in the Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale areas, and there'll be sort of a number of women that have come forward to me already, and I suspect there'll be more that come out in the near future. We should note that the National Center for Policy Analysis, which is the Dallas-based think tank where Colonel West is currently the president, the CEO of that organization. They've had their own kind of scandal in the past involving sexual harassment, and so I reached out repeatedly to members of the board there, as well as asking them for a statement or for a comment. Thus far, no one has denied it. No one has publicly denied it, and I suspect that we'll continue to have more material coming as next week as we kind of turn on to some of the other angles of the story. But it's unfortunate, to have to do this type of story. I mean, Colonel West is a hero of mine, or was a hero of mine. He's a real conservative icon, and I actually began the investigation of him several years back because I wanted him to run for higher office. And so I interviewed a number of people who knew him. A pattern emerged where he had a number of young women who worked for him. Those young women seldom stayed on for very long, working for him, and there was sort of a kind of a culture that developed there in his campaign office that was noted as pretty strange by a number of my sources. And I've interviewed some of the people who've moved on from there. I've interviewed people who knew him in Florida. I interviewed people who knew him in the military, people who worked on both his 2008 campaign as well as his 2010 campaign. There'll be more material coming out as time comes on.
Okay, now I want to be clear in this. Michelle Fields, and you stated in this article that she, and I'm going to quote you here, that Fields repeatedly and emphatically refused to comment on the record and asked that I change her earlier confirmation, which I have now done. Explain that to our audience, because first she came out and said, yes,
sure. So what I was doing there, and I realize that it's not ideal. But I spoke to Michelle. I spoke to Michelle many times. I do know her. I wouldn't say that we're friends, but we have mutual friends in common. Spoke to her many times over the past year. We weren't colleagues at the Daily Caller, but we knew of each other. And she asked me to kind of take out the confirmation. She's of the view that she doesn't want to confirm or deny it. She just wants to kind of put it behind her. I encourage people to reach out to her and ask her about the rather serious allegations. But I mean, I can confirm that they happened. I can confirm that they were reported to to the bosses at Pajamas Media. I did confirm that they were what began the process of Alan West leaving Pajamas Media. Of course, it culminated in the Sarah Culverhouse Mills incident, in which Alan West reportedly was undressing himself in front of in front of the communications professional who later wrote the press release about why he left the organization.
Let's talk about that a little bit. You bring up Mrs. Mills, and you're actually quite forward in that. So what you're saying, and this came from Miss Mills or Mrs. Mills herself, saying that Mr. West actually stripped.
No, I did not. I did not interview. Correct. I did not interview her, but I was aware. I did talk with people who were in the leadership that made the decision to remove Mr. West or Colonel West, and I haven't had enough sources to kind of confirm it. Well, we can say that so we can say that Pajamas Media ultimately came to the decision to remove him. Obviously, Pajamas Media is owned by Aubrey Chernick, who's a billionaire based in Los Angeles, and presumably, and from what I can tell from sources, that all kind of final decisions kind of come from him. So presumably, he's the one who made the final call. But I do know people in the leadership there. I knew people who worked there. I knew people who've since left there. And this was what was known by staffers at the time, and they kind of all independently corroborated each other when I interviewed them. Many of them didn't want to go on record because they had signed non-disparagement agreements, but nonetheless, this is kind of what I've discovered.
Okay, I want to move on into the part of this conversation to Joyce Kaufman, and she used to work for Alan West when he was a congressman over in Florida. Explain her relationship and her part in all of this.
Well, she was an early and enthusiastic supporter of Alan West. She supported him in his 2008 and in his 2010 runs, not in his 2012 run. And she is a talk show host down in South Florida. She was going to be the chief of staff for Alan West until her allegedly controversial remarks about Muslims were made public, and then she promptly resigned or was forced out, depending on your point of view. But she, she like me was a supporter of West, who kind of came to her own independent conclusions about Alan West's alleged problems with women. And she confirmed a lot of what I was saying about his issues with women, things that she observed while she was on the campaign trail with him, and things that she observed by basically being very close with him. And she and I did an interview earlier today, which is posted at gotnews.com, where you can kind of hear her speak for herself about what she observed and what she experienced working for him.
Now, she mentioned in that interview with you today that she was the target of harassing comments herself, and said she was very hurt by those comments that he used against her. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, she's told me this. I've had other women who are older women. I mean, Alan West is, according to these women, often will say sexually inappropriate things, particularly, discussing a woman's body. Said some other issues, or said some other things related to male anatomy. And so, there are a number of women who kind of come forward and corroborated this, including grandmothers, including conservative columnists, including a communications professional that I tracked down, who since left politics entirely. So there's going to be other women that will come forward. And part of the purpose of this story was to really, get at and discuss something that has been kind of an open secret, and that needs to be, I think, discussed by conservatives generally who like Alan West, but who may not know this perhaps darker side to him.
Now I want to move back to the part of this story when you and I don't know if you can speak to this, but apparently Pajama Media is not doing well as a media company, according to you. Why is that?
Yes, well, I another publication, conservative publication. I learned that they at Breitbart.com. I learned that Pajamas Media approached them several months back and to talk about buying out or acquiring Pajamas Media. That ultimately the Breitbart people decided that it wasn't worth their efforts. And if you look at the number of people who've kind of left Pajamas Media over the years, more and more of them are leaving the organization. Reportedly, people are having a hard time getting paid from Pajamas Media. And what's happening is that slowly but surely the organization is sort of winding down. Now, I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know when it's going to happen. But
does this have anything to do with the situation with Alan West, or is this a completely separate story and unrelated to your story on Mr.
West? It's difficult to say. I did not. My sources didn't seem to know. I mean, they did know that a number of people have left there. Tammy Bruce has left there. John Phillips, Michelle Fields, Alan West, of course, and that those people are not being replaced. And that it's sort of the whole organization is sort of slowly winding down and no longer kind of the place it once was, a few years back.
Now you say you are releasing a second part to this story next week. Can you? And I know you can't identify the women. How many more women are there? And does this? How many years?
It's an interesting question. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't honestly know the answer to how many there will wind up being. I do know that there are a number who have been identified by me and by others, and I'm going through now to make sure that we get all of them correctly identified, that we get their stories out there, trying to get more of them to come on record. As you can imagine, it's a bit difficult given that many of them are supporters of Alan West politically, but nonetheless they find themselves disturbed by what they experienced. And so I think as time goes on, the more will come out. More people have reached out to me today, and as it kind of develops, there'll be more stories out there. Now, as to how far it goes back, I honestly don't know. I mean, most of the allegations that have come to me have come from after he left the military, which was a number of years back, in the kind of mid 2000s, and so don't know yet how far back it goes. But I do think that there'll be more that will certainly come out.
Now, as I stated, this took 2 years for you to do. Why did this take so long for you to do? If it was only concerning only two women that Mr.
Well,
West,
part of the reason I've got to say. Sure. Part of the problem was that I was, along the way I was working for other publications, and I didn't really quite have the freedom I have since I started my own organization. Many kind of conservatives know about this, but they don't want to talk about it, and so I was kind of at an impasse as to what to do, and it kept gnawing at me, and it made me feel kind of guilty because I knew this. I know that there are people who support Alan West, and indeed, there's some people now who want him to run for higher office still. And I wanted people to just know that this is out there, and to have them kind of figure out how they're going to deal with it. And I hope they can come to some satisfactory conclusion. But it's really lamentable. I mean, it really is terrible to have to go and expose something about hero abuse. And yet, I think it's important for conservatives and people who are reporters to have their politics grounded on truth and on the truth about people. And so it's with a heavy heart that I published it. It took me a very long time, perhaps 6-7 months until I had the answer already. And I wanted to be sure of it 100%. I double-checked it. I did many interviews with the same people. I confirmed it. I got them to kind of recreate the scenarios, and unfortunately, it's true. So
I gotta ask you. You sound as if you did this with a very heavy heart. You sound like you're a very big fan of Allen West. Most people who would support Allen West would be looking at you right now and saying, "How dare you do this thing? What the hell are you doing? Why are you making such a great man look so bad? What did he ever do to you? Why are you helping the liberal Main Street media to trash a conservative such as Allen West?"
Well, I would kind of argue that I'm a journalist first and foremost, more than I'm a conservative, and I think people have a right to know this. Now, people may decide that these kind of sexual infidelities don't bother them about Allen West. I mean, that's their right. I mean, we've certainly excused a lot of other politicians. Mark Sanford, Republican, comes to mind, or some more Democrats have sort of gotten away with sexual improprieties before. So I don't think people have a right to make up their own determinations of it. But what bothered me is that this is, Allen West was at one time considered for a vice presidential ticket in Florida. He was vetted by GOP figures there, and people know about this. And my concern is that, if you have a sort of impropriety, it can be used to extort you or blackmail you. Indeed, that's what we saw with the former president of NCPA, John Goodman, who allegedly groped or had a sexual encounter with a subordinate, and then she turned around and tried to extort him for more money, or to get more money, to get paid more money from the organization. And so I think it's important that people just know what they're dealing with, and I think people have a right to obviously draw their own conclusions. People can decide for themselves whether they want to vote for Allen West or support his organizations in the future. But I think they have a right to know this, and so that's why I published the material in the final analysis. And I've got to tell you, since I published it, I feel much more at peace, because it's been bothering me, because I didn't want to be a part of any kind of cover-up of this information, I didn't want to be complicit in kind of covering it up, even though I politically admire Allen West, and of course, thank him for his long military service.
What do you hope comes out of this? Because of course, anyone who puts out something like this, and of course, I've interviewed many people who have exposed people. I interviewed James O'Keefe just last month, and he stated even to me on the air that he regretted stating on his Twitter page that he feared for his life after exposing Jesse Jackson for the likeliness of what it is, after Jesse Jackson decided to use the lives of Trayvon Martin and other African Americans that were killed for his own cash benefit. I
think you're referring to Al Sharpton. O'Keefe hasn't done anything with Jesse Jackson. It was an Al Sharpton. Yeah.
I beg your pardon, Al Sharpton.
No, I think obviously those of us who are kind of millennials, who've kind of grown up and developed our own kind of media properties, I have with Got News. James O'Keefe has done it with Project Veritas. We were both kind of disciples and contemporaries with Andrew Breitbart. We both sort of grew up, with Andrew as a mentor until he died 3 years back. So what I would say is that, O'Keefe and I, we both have a very strong commitment to the truth. We have a very strong commitment to letting the chips fall where they may. We have a very strong commitment to credibility, to being consistent across the board, and to calling out things that are wrong, even occasionally, and unfortunately when it concerns sort of our quote-unquote own side. But it's my view that in order to transcend and to really be influential, the new media that's kind of cropping up right now, it shouldn't replicate the defects or deficiencies of the mainstream media and basically just do right-wing bias. It should really try and give people the facts as they are, not as we wish them to be. and that's an unfortunate. I mean, it's something to be lauded for and works towards, but it's an unfortunate part of the process. But it's a necessary one, I'm afraid.
Again, I'll ask you, what do you expect out of this? Do you want Alan West to go to jail for what he has done?
No, I mean, look, it's not really for me to say. I mean, I just want people to know about it, and they can draw their own conclusions. I mean, I don't think anything he did was criminal. You know, I honestly don't know that. I didn't find anything criminal, but you know, I'm not an attorney, so I couldn't tell you. You know, what do I want to have out of it? I want people to know about it. I want people to. I want the women who were mistreated by Alan West to feel comfortable coming forward and sharing their stories, and I want kind of conservatives out there who support Alan West because they think of him as an ethical, you know, family man, to know that this part about him exists, and they can decide for themselves what they want to do. I mean, human beings are extremely complicated. Just because somebody, you know, is lousy in one part of their lives doesn't mean they can't do great things in other parts. And so what I really wanted to do is just have it off my chest and have people, you know what I know, and that I've kind of been in the process of discovering over these past few years.
Yeah, and we talked off air today, and you even expressed to me, and I hope I can express this, that you're tired. You're very tired. This was a very exhaustive process on you.
Indeed, and part of the reason I waited until Thursday of this week was because I really didn't want to publish it. I reached out to a lot of people for comments. I reached out hoping that somebody would be able to tell me something that would basically destroy my whole story, and unfortunately that didn't happen. And in fact, on the other hand, I had not on the other hand, but on, you know, contrary, I had people who kind of said, you know, you should do this. Like, this is necessary. You know, so I wish somebody had done this earlier. And I, you know, I've gotten lots of emails from many kind of influential people in the conservative movement cheering me on. I've gotten a few from detractors saying, you know, why did I have to do this? Well, you know, the situation is that we who are sort of on the right have to have standards and have to make sure that those standards are applied evenly. And, you know, I've even had people say, oh, you know, this is a standard attack that's used against black conservatives. Well, you know, we should. It's kind of a ridiculous claim, but it's worth kind of exposing, because, you know, we hold our politicians. We should hold all politicians, all public figures, to the same standard. And Herman Cain, as well as Alan West, both black men, both who you know were accused of committing sexual impropriety, and so people should know about this and they should draw their own conclusions. I wish both of them well. I'm politically a supporter of both of them, but people need to know about this before they draw their own conclusions for themselves.
Now, looking at this entire event at the scope of a journalist at this point, have you learned any lessons? Have any regrets in how you have done this investigation of Mr. West in any way? Would there be one thing different?
I wish I'd probably come out with it sooner. I mean, one of the things that has bothered me is it's really been eating at my conscience for a while. I also wish that I didn't have to do it. I mean, I wish that somebody else would come forward. I wish other people would. I wish that Alan West would probably, would have, worked on this himself. I wish that other people would have kind of counseled him to avoid these kind of problems. But as for what I could have done, no. I mean, I'm concerned about the kind of growing tribalism that's occurring within the media landscape generally, where basically people only report the truth if it hurts the other side or helps their side. And I don't think that that's what people want from media, and I don't think that's what the purpose of journalism is about. And so, the regrets I have are that I didn't do it sooner. And I think as time goes on, there'll be more. We'll just stay with the story, and there'll be more information and releases in the coming days.
And when do you expect to release that? And will you come back on the Evan Miller Report to further talk to us about? Because Charles, literally, what you have done today has uprooted a scandal, if we can call it that, the worst scandal since the Clinton administration with Monica Lewinsky. And then, of course, there's the pajama media story.
I don't know that I would go that far.
Separate media story.
I wouldn't go that far, but I would say, because obviously Alan West is not in politics right now, and he's not the president. But what I would say is that, people need to know about this, and unfortunately, it falls to me to be the one to tell them. But I hope Alan West can come out and explain himself. I hope he gets the help that he needs in dealing with this, because it's. These are serious, credible, allegations. They're things that happened, and I want him to get help. I wish the best for him.
Charles, you certainly gave us a shocker today, and we want you to keep us updated. One more story, not related to this. I understand you have a possible answer to why Senator Harry Reid, the former majority leader in the Senate, now the minority leader, has decided to retire after over of his long Senate career next year in 2016. Do we have any information on that?
Yes, well, I did a story a while ago about Senator Menendez and this mega donor Salmon Melhen, who has given and essentially stolen, millions and millions of dollars from Medicare. And Melhen was basically defended by Harry Reid, and Harry Reid met with the FBI, and after he met with them, he's very quickly decided that he wants to step down. So I've heard that there are more indictments coming. Menendez himself is being indicted right now. The question is whether or not they're going to indict Harry Reid as well. And that's sort of an open question, but I continue to pursue it. I mean, I'm working phones and calling my sources in Nevada, and hoping to get an answer to some of the questions that I've had.
Yeah, because it's certainly shocking. Because I was, of course, listening to CNN in my car on the way home this morning, and it was quite the shocker this morning. When I heard Harry Reid was stepping down, because everyone was under the assumption that he was going to run for another term in 2016, and then boom, the shock and awe came that he's decided to step down next year. So we hope you keep us up to date on that, and of course this breaking story today, which I'm still baffled at this point. It's not more disbelief; it's more shock. Because I've admired Alan West, and my goodness, this is still a shock to me, Charles, that this is out here, and I think America is going to be in shock for at least the rest of the weekend as they try to digest this news that Alan West sexually harassed not only 2 women but many more women, as you're going to let out next week.
Well, thank you again for having me, and have a good weekend.
Well, you do too, Charles, and keep in contact with us, and please let us know when you put the second part of your story out, and we'll have you right back on.
Will do. Thank you so much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is Charles C. Johnson. He is the editor-in-chief of Got News out here on the Evan Miller Report, and speaking to us exclusively regarding Alan West supposedly sexually harassing at least 2 women. This is new information coming in exclusively to the Evan Miller Report as we break it up tonight here on the SHR Media Network and Pundit Press Radio. I'm Jason Miller, and we will be right back after these messages.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
What's up, everyone? Corey Evan here from the SHR Weekender. I describe the Weekender as a news magazine. You might describe it as business in the front, party in the back. I bring you the big stories of the week, the ones that matter, and help you make sense of them. But I also bring you lots of fun stories, too. That's because I know you've got weekend plans. Besides, I love doing features. I read the classifieds. I take public figures for a spin. And who else do you know who reads a game show news minute? Thought so. That's what I bring you every Saturday at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific on shrmedia.com. I'll see you on the Weekender.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network. Conservative.
In a moment, cancer changed our lives forever.
We were told nothing could be done to enjoy these final moments together.
But in that moment, when all seemed lost,
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital gave us hope.
Because at this moment, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is saving lives with pioneering research and care. We're changing the way the world treats childhood cancer by sharing our discoveries with doctors and scientists everywhere.
And we'll never have to pay St. Jude for anything, ever.
At this moment, she wants to be in her own bed.
I want to be back at school with my friends.
I want to be outside playing.
Please take a moment and join St. Jude in finding cures and saving children. Visit stjude.org.
And welcome back to the Evan Miller Report. I'm Jason Miller. Corey Evan is on assignment for the SHR Weekend News, airing Saturdays at 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific here on SHR Media. All right, folks, it's time. Corey Evan is not here live today, but he did manage to put together tonight's Lawsuits Across America and the Entertainment Report. So let's go ahead and go to Corey first, and he has what's on the docket for tonight's Lawsuits Across America. Corey, take it away.
I thank you, Jay. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated to come to order and put on your gas masks. This Lawsuits Across America from the City of Marijuana is now in session. Specifically, this first top item on the docket. From KOMO News in Washington, the state's top legal official is formally urging the U.S. Supreme Court to reject a lawsuit by Nebraska and Oklahoma that challenges Colorado's marijuana laws, saying it could threaten Washington state's own fledgling system for regulating pot. State Attorney General Bob Ferguson made his arguments in a friend of the court brief filed on Friday. Nebraska and Oklahoma filed a lawsuit with the High Court in December, claiming that Colorado's Amendment 64, legalizing marijuana under state law, is preempted by federal drug laws. They asked the court to hear the case under its original jurisdiction over lawsuits between states. Washington state's legal brief urges the court to reject that request. The lawsuit by Oklahoma and Nebraska officials claims that marijuana purchased in Colorado is being brought into neighboring states where it remains illegal. Some law enforcement agencies in western Nebraska along the Colorado border have complained that marijuana from the neighboring state has drained the resources. Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt says Colorado's legalization of pot has hindered his state's efforts to enforce its anti-marijuana laws. Pruitt said marijuana poses health and safety risks to children and teens. Which it does, because they say that it's safer than cigarettes. B to the S to the get out of town, you hippies. Next up out of Tennessee Free Press, Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam says he was both surprised and disappointed that school boards in Hamilton and 6 nearby counties sued the state over state education funding 1 day after he met with superintendents of Tennessee's 4 largest systems. Haslam said, quote, "Nobody can say we had a budget that ignored education. We put $144 million in this year's budget. And if you've been around the state budget and realize how little new money there is to use, that's a significant commitment," unquote. The Republican governor said, "We're looking at doing everything we can to do more. I just don't know how a lawsuit helps that." This week's Chancery Court lawsuit filed in Nashville alleges the state has underfunded the state's basic education program funding formula, which distributes the state share of funds for public education. Hamilton, Bradley, Polk, McMinn, Marion, Grundy, and Coffee County school boards allege in the suit that the state, quote, breached its duty under the Tennessee Constitution to provide a system of free public education for the children of the state, unquote. Haslam also said, quote, we're not going to say, now that we've been sued, we're going to shut down our efforts. We're still going to try to get the right outcome, unquote. Good luck to you, Governor Haslam. And finally, out of Florida, from Jacksonville.com, the federal government settled a lawsuit this month filed against a local ambulance company and 4 hospitals, while continuing a separate fraud lawsuit against a second ambulance company. In 2011, the U.S. government sued Century Ambulance and Liberty Ambulance, as well as UF Health Jacksonville, Memorial Hospital Orange Park Medical Center, and Baptist Medical Center Jacksonville. After settling the lawsuits with all but Liberty Ambulance, a federal judge unsealed some documents in the case. The government claimed the companies and hospitals defrauded the U.S. The ambulance companies transported patients and claimed the patients had a medical need for the ambulances, when they didn't, according to the government's lawsuit. The federal government believes Century Ambulance with the hospitals submitted false claims of more than $5 million. Liberty Ambulance submitted false claims of more than $10 million, the lawsuit said. Sean Pelletier, an EMT since 1998, worked for Century Ambulance from 2004 to 2006. He said he witnessed documents being falsified for the purpose of billing Medicare or Medicaid. From 2007 to 2009, he worked for Liberty Ambulance. The 2 companies billed the U.S. for medically unnecessary trips, the lawsuit said. Pelletier acted as a whistleblower for the government, so he will get a share of the amount of money the government recovers. The government and the companies haven't finalized the settlement agreement yet. In the next few months, the government will file a new complaint against Liberty Ambulance for filing false claims, according to U.S. Attorney's Office spokeswoman Amy Fijones. Yeah, once you get all of those losses straightened out, federal government officials, why don't you focus on the next thing that's draining our pocketbook? Barack Obama, defamation of independence! At least that's my ruling in this case. And on that note, I declare today's lawsuits across America case dismissed.
Corey Evan with tonight's lawsuits across America, and I don't know what is up with Corey Evan's current obsession with Swiss cuckoo clocks. But that's an interesting sound effect today. And, of course, we're looking forward to what he has in store on the Weekender for tomorrow. All right, folks, before we wrap it up this evening, here's Corey Evan, and he has your entertainment report and what's going out on the movies. Corey.
I thank you, Jay, and employers have been inundated, literally, with requests from grieving One Direction fans in my entertainment news. According to the UK Telegraph, Zayn Malik's departure from British boy band One Direction has caused such consternation amongst fans that employers have been inundated with requests for compassionate leave. Mr. Malik announced that he was leaving the band 2 days ago, prompting a flurry of calls to employment law firm Peninsula, which provides advice on staff rights in the workplace as employees sought time off to grieve. Alan Price, a director at Peninsula, yesterday tweeted that, quote, "You could not make this up. According to the Manchester-based firm, there have been hundreds of calls about Mr. Malik." Speaking to the Telegraph this morning, Mr. Price said, quote, "In terms of famous celebrities and their impact on employees, Zayn Malik has to go down as a person that has caused the most upset. Social media has certainly been a factor in this, with employees responding with their thoughts and feelings. The reaction is certainly more significant than when Take That split up or when Robbie Williams left the group." Imagine that. One boy decides to leave One Direction and take a totally different direction, and the whole world cries, "Why?" That's amazing to me, I think. And here's something that will amaze my Jennifer. From Variety.com, Masi Oka, who played the lovable space-time manipulator Hiro Nakamura on the NBC drama Heroes, will reprise his role as a guest star for the show's successor, the miniseries Heroes Reborn.
Dipper double rare.
Jack Coleman also returns to play the suspicious, if well-meaning, Jack Bennett, also known as the man with the horn-rimmed glasses. New cast members include Zachary Levi, Ryan Guzman, Robbie Kay, Danica Yarosh, Judith Ciccone, Henry Zebrowski, and Gatlin Green. Creator Tim Kring is executive producing along with James Middleton and Peter Elkoff. The show is produced by Imperative Entertainment in association with Universal Television. So I'm guessing that they're sending a message that it's imperative you do not miss. But I'd say it's not imperative to watch Get Hard. The new comedy Get Hard stars Will Ferrell as a clueless hedge fund manager who narrow-mindedly enlists one of the only black guys he knows, a car washer played by Kevin Hart, to toughen him up for an impending prison term.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Here's hoping that Ferrell, Hart, and first-time feature director Ethan Cohen are resilient themselves, because reviews are not being kind to the film. Although Get Hard, with 4 credited writers including Cohen, attempts to walk the tricky line between satirizing stereotypes and reinforcing them, many critics say the movie is only occasionally funny and often tone-deaf. But if you're into watching clueless old men try and turn young attitude-wise, well, here's to your health. Thankfully, we've got other options at the box office, such as Home with Jim Parsons and Rihanna, that's on my list, and Serena with Jennifer Lawrence and Bradley Cooper, which is certainly to make Jay's list. And with that, that is your entertainment report for today. I hope to entertain you tomorrow on the SHR Weekender, 3 Eastern, noon Pacific, right here on SHR Media. And get ready, because this time, we're doing a little bit of games and sports at the Wheel of Misfortune. That's our rotating segment for this week. You're not going to want to miss the SHR Weekender, and I'm certain that Jay won't miss it. Will you, Jay? Wink, wink.
No, I certainly will not. Nothing like a little fun and games on a Saturday afternoon with Mr. Corey Evan. Corey Evan with the Entertainment Report, thank you so much. And yeah, you may see that Jennifer Lawrence film. It really depends if I have the time. I'm going to be listening to the SHR Weekend News with Corey Evan, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, as he mentioned. All right, folks, briefly before we send it off to the weather with Daniel Bennett over at the BBC World Service, Charles C. Johnson from GotNews.com has told the Evan Miller Report tonight and on his article at GotNews.com that he can confirm that conservative icon Alan West sexually harassed 2 different women at Pajamas Media using more than a dozen sources, according to Mr. Johnson. West, who was then fired from Pajamas Media, grabbed the then 24-year-old Michelle Fields, the now Fox News correspondent, in front of an elevator. Stay with the Evan Miller Report for more on this story, and for a link to the story from Got News, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. For Corey Evan, I'm Jason Miller saying so long from San Diego. Have a great night, and we hope that you tune in on Monday. Coming up next, as I said, the weather with Darren Bennett from the BBC Met Office. Good night, everybody.
Active weather system is clearing away from the eastern seaboard. Some strong winds behind that. Some stronger winds in the Pacific Northwest as well, with this mixture of rain and mountain snow moving in. Feels very much milder, much warmer in the sunshine across the western side of North America than the east. In the east, we've again got this plunge of colder air, and temperatures in many places are below average for the time of year. So a real mixture really from west to east. Kick-off in the west then on Saturday, and the Pacific Northwest seeing some more wet, windy weather coming into coastal areas, in particular of British Columbia. This rain and snow breaking off into the Rockies, again dry across California, some high temperatures likely here, also across Utah and Nevada. Across the northeast of the US and eastern Canada, it's still stubbornly cold, and maybe even a mixture of sleet and snow in New York for a while on Saturday. Elsewhere, it is dry, the rains having cleared away from Florida. The sunshine returns for the first half of the weekend. It looks like it will remain dry in Miami on Sunday and into Monday too, but still quite cold in Montreal and New York, though temperatures are rising a little. Further west, still very mixed across the Pacific Northwest, and further spells of wet and windy weather, but it's dry and sunny to the south.
You've been listening to the Evan Miller Report. For more information about today's program, go to shrmedia.com or thepunditpress.com. Thanks for listening. Hope you tune in again next time.